Hello everybody, thanks for joining me again. Today we're going to be taking a look at making a versatile dark/forest Psytrance bass. So here's what we're going to try to aim for, something very similar to this bass line, and just to show you how it can sound across some different notes, here it is. Okay, so yeah, as you can tell, it's quite versatile. It sounds quite good on most notes, I think. Okay, so I'm gonna go for probably a D. Classic sort of forest note. Anyhow, let's dive in. First thing you're going to need is a blank MIDI channel, and let's create a MIDI region on it. Find D1. Let's put in 3 notes. And I'm going to set the second set 2 notes, so on the 3 and the 4, it's going to be full velocity, and this first note will be the lowest possible velocity. It's going to let us control the groove with a velocity device. Okay, so let's grab a velocity device from the MIDI effects, and I'm going to set the out low to quite a high number, probably about 100. So we'll get a little bit of pumping, but not very much. Okay, so now you're going to need Pigments. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is go New Preset, and then what we're going to do is just turn off the utility engine. We don't need that. And then we're going to set engine 1 to the sample engine. So the reason we're going to do this is that in the other engines, we can't actually set the phase position for the waveform, which is a bit of a problem for bass because it's very useful to be able to choose where the actual start point is of our waveform. In the wavetable engine, we can set the phase sync source to self and then set the phase mod to 0, and that will force the waveform to start right at the beginning of the file every single time, but you don't always want that. So let's go over to sample, and you're going to want to import some single cycle waveforms. So for example, if you've got the Forest Eye Volume 2 modulators folder, then you will have a whole bunch of single cycle waveforms, and you can just load those up in here. Okay, so once you've got your single cycle in, you're going to need to press this edit button up here and tell Pigments what pitch this file is. So if you have used the waveforms from the Forest Eye Volume 2 modulators folder, then once it's in, you're going to need to set the fine to 0.215 and the root note to F0. If you're importing your own waveforms, then you will need to work out what the pitch of those is. So regardless, you need to press this loop button, and then it will loop through like an oscillator, or it will behave as an oscillator. Okay, so if you have imported your own stuff, you're just going to need to play a long note and use a tuner, and then just tweak the root note and then the fine until your note that is playing matches the one that is showing up on the tuner. Cool. So now there's not a lot else we need to do here. We just turn off the shaper mode. We can leave the coarse and fine alone, and then I usually set this filter to about 4% or something like that. It just gives like a little bit of shaping to the waveform. Okay, cool. So the whole point of us doing that was to let us choose the phase position. So I'm going to set this right in the middle, so 0.5, so that it's at the 0 crossing. Okay, so now we can move on. Let's go over to the filter. Actually, before we do anything, I do always find this helps me if I'm making the sort of darker basses. I'm just going to open up an EQ, parametric EQ, and I'm just going to make a huge dip, so as much as I can, 15 dB dip at 500 Hertz. I always find that pulling out this 500 Hertz area really helps me to get that kind of tone. And yeah, we'll leave it like that. Cool. And also, actually, I always end up putting on a 5K low pass as well, so let's just do that. Or as close as you can get it anyway. Okay, and then I'm going to turn the Q all the way down. So it's nice curve there. Okay, cool. So now let's go over to the filter. I'm going to go with a 12 dB low pass, resonance all the way down, keyboard tracking all the way up, and then I want the cutoff. I want to pull it down until I'm just hearing like a little bit of bass, really. With the keyboard tracking on in Pigments, this is around about 200 Hertz. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Cool. So let's also turn on this velocity all the way up, just so we're getting that little bit of sort of sidechain type thing going on. And now let's move on to the envelopes. Okay, so let's start by putting an envelope on the cutoff. So either envelope 2 or envelope 3. I'm just going to use envelope 3, and I'm going to set it to 1.0, so full amount of modulation. And then let's tweak these envelope parameters. So probably want around about 100 milliseconds of decay, because that's a 16th at 150, which is the BPM we're at right now. So let's pull this down. So yeah, 100. And you can do a bit higher or a bit lower, whatever sounds better to you. We'll tweak that in a moment. It's important that we go for a decay curve of 0. Okay, now let's just hear what that sounds like. Okay, so that is the sort of thing we're looking for. Let's just tweak the decay, just check if there's a better point around there. Sounds just sort of slightly tighter at 95 milliseconds to me. Okay, and then with the decay curve, for these darker basses, I prefer to have either a straight line or an outward curve. So usually we have like an exponential curve, so it goes down and curves out. Whereas for these style basses, I find it sounds better with either a straight line or a whatever the opposite of exponential type curve is. Okay, so just so you can hear what that would sound like if we did give it that. Okay, so I'll just set it back to 0. Cool, I'm going to leave the attack alone and the release. You want a longish release, because we don't want any really fast movements of the filter at the end of the note, because that will generate an unpleasant sort of sound. It's just not really what we're looking for. So yeah, leave it at 100 milliseconds, that'll be fine. Okay, so now we can go and deal with the amp envelope. I'm going to go with an attack of about 10 milliseconds, and this is what gives these sort of foresty basses that kind of sort of smoothed off or smeared transient. Rather than like a click, it's more of like a sort of buzz or something. Okay, and then let's set the decay to be 100 milliseconds, or as close to it as we can get. And then I want a sustain all the way down, and I'm going to set the curve to sort of outwards curve around about 3 or so. You can play with this yourself. It's just going to dictate kind of how much body the bass actually has. It can be useful for sort of different keys sometimes if you want to get a bit of control over how much sub there actually is to play with this decay curve. Okay, so let's have a listen to that quickly. Okay, so that's definitely going in the right direction. Right, so let's move on to the effects. That is the sort of main patch done now, really. I'll do a little bit of stuff in the effects as well, just to sort of polish it off a bit. Obviously, some post-processing is going to be preferable, but it's really up to you. So now I'm going to grab the multiband compressor. We're not actually going to do any compression with it. I'm just using this to get the multiband, the crossovers to happen. So click on presets and go default. Okay, and then you can set these crossovers wherever you want, but I like them in sort of around about sort of 70, 80 hertz. Yeah, we'll go for that. 77, that'll do. And then for this upper one, I like to have one around 600 hertz area because it has a nice effect on the transient. That will probably do the job. Right, just so you can see what that is actually doing, we'll get the scope up quickly. So without the multiband, we have that saw, fairly normal-ish saw wave, and then with the multiband, we have that shape, which is definitely going towards the sort of shape I would aim for these darker basses. Right, then let's move on. More effects. So really from here, it is down to taste, but I quite like to do a little bit more filtering and a bit more EQ. Particularly, I like to pull out, I think it's the 4th harmonic. Just a dip on there almost always sounds good to me. So firstly, let's get a multi-filter and then a parametric EQ. For the multi-filter, I'm just going to go for a 24 dB cut at about 5k again, just purely to get rid of any more of that high stuff going on. It's up to you though. If you want that high stuff, then don't do this. This is sort of all down to taste now. Right, so just quickly hear that. I personally really like how it emphasizes the sort of more mid-range rather than the highs. Right, and then for that 4th harmonic, let's get a node on here, and let's get the keyboard modulator and pop it on the frequency here, and just set it all the way, so 1.0, and then try to find the spot where we're trying to attenuate. Okay, yeah, so to me it sounds a bit tighter with a bit less of that harmonic. And because we've done that keyboard tracking, we can change the note and it will still only take away from that specific harmonic. And then this might seem counterproductive considering we've just filtered out this stuff here, but we can boost these high mids again a little bit if we want. Just a bit, maybe like 2 dB or something. Maybe not quite that much. Yeah, just gives a nice little finishing touch. Okay, so there we have it. Our foresty bass preset. Let's just bring the volume up. Just check that it tracks well across the keyboard. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like and subscribe. Don't forget to join the Discord server as well. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time.